The great assembly hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 847 different species gathered here every cycle to discuss the future of the galaxy. Some walked on legs, others floated in gas bubbles, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special suits. For 3,000 years, they had met in peace. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the human section, watching the morning session begin. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the dark blue uniform that all human diplomats used. She looked ordinary compared to the colorful aliens around her, but everyone in the hall knew that humans were far from ordinary. The Galactic Assembly had been around much longer than humanity's membership. When humans first joined 400 years ago, most species thought they were just another primitive race from a small planet. Earth was nothing special. A wet rock in an empty part of space. Humans seemed weak and short-lived compared to the great powers of the galaxy. But something strange happened over the centuries. Humans began showing up everywhere important things needed to be done. When 2 ancient species went to war over a trading dispute that had lasted for 600 years, human mediators somehow got them to sign a peace treaty in 3 days. When the dangerous Maelstrom sector needed to be explored for new resources, human crews volunteered for missions that killed most other species. When the Assembly needed peacekeepers to stop violence on frontier worlds, humans stepped forward. Now, after 4 centuries, the galaxy had changed. Human fingerprints were on everything that mattered. They ran the military forces that kept peace between hostile species. They operated the deep space research stations in regions too dangerous for others. They mediated conflicts that seemed impossible to solve. Other species had started depending on them without even realizing it. Elena remembered her training on Earth. The instructors had explained why humans were different from most galactic species. Many aliens had evolved past their primitive survival instincts. They were logical, peaceful, and predictable. But humans still carried their ancient drives, the need to form groups with strangers, the willingness to die for people they barely knew, the strange ability to adapt to any situation. Other species found these traits disturbing. Humans would pack bond with anyone, even former enemies. A human soldier would risk her life to save an alien she had met 5 minutes ago. Human engineers would work for months in deadly conditions to fix a problem that affected people they would never meet. To most galactic citizens, this behavior seemed insane, but it worked. The Assembly had discovered that humans could do things no other species could manage. They could build trust between groups that had hated each other for millennia. They could survive in places that would kill anyone else. They could find creative solutions to problems that stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. The morning session started with a report from the Kepler system. A mining dispute between the crystal-based silicates and the gas-dwelling Nimbus had turned violent. 17 workers had died, and both sides were mobilizing military forces. Peacekeeping Team 7 has resolved the situation, announced Speaker Thex-9, a tall being made of living metal. Human mediator Captain Sarah Chen negotiated a new mining agreement. Both species have agreed to shared profits and safety protocols. Elena smiled. Sarah was good at her job. She had a gift for understanding what different species needed and finding ways to give it to them. The silicates wanted respect for their ancient claims to the crystal caves. The Nimbus needed access to rare gases found in the same area. Sarah had figured out how to give both groups what they wanted. The next report came from the Outer Rim. The energy beings called Lumens had been attacked by space pirates. Their homeworld was under siege, and their defense systems were failing. Fleet Commander Marcus Torres and the Human Defense Corps broke the pirate blockade yesterday. Speaker Thex-9 continued. The Lumen homeworld is secure. Commander Torres reports minimal casualties among human forces. Elena knew Marcus personally. He was typical of human military leaders. Clever, brave, and completely willing to put his ships in danger to protect aliens he had never met before. The Defense Corps was 90% human volunteers. Other species contributed money and equipment, but very few were willing to actually fight. As the session continued, Elena noticed a pattern in every report. Humans were involved in solving every major problem. They were the ones taking risks, making sacrifices, and finding answers. The rest of the galaxy had learned to step back and let humans handle the dangerous work. The Altarian Collective reported that human engineers had fixed their failing star fusion reactor. Without human intervention, their entire system would have gone cold. The Wanderer fleet announced that human navigators had found them a new route through the Death Nebula, cutting their travel time by half. The Academic Union thanked human researchers for breakthrough discoveries in quantum biology. Elena began to feel uneasy. When had humans become so essential to everything? She remembered stories from her grandmother about the early days of human membership. Back then, humans were just one voice among hundreds. Now it seemed like the galaxy could not function without them. During the lunch break, Elena walked through the diplomatic quarters. She overheard conversations in dozens of languages, but many of them mentioned humans. The Centauri delegation was discussing how to request human help with their food shortage. The Vegan Republic wanted human advisors for their new colony ships. The Machine Collective was asking for human technicians to repair their quantum computers. Elena stopped walking. She realized something that made her stomach feel cold. The Galactic Assembly was no longer a partnership of equals. Humans had become the foundation that held everything together. Other species had stopped learning how to solve their own problems. They just waited for humans to fix things. That evening, Elena sent a coded message to Earth. She used old diplomatic channels that few aliens knew about. Her message was simple. We need to talk about our situation here. I think we have a problem. She did not know that her message would start a chain of events that would change the galaxy forever. As she looked out at the stars from her quarters, Elena wondered what would happen if humans ever decided to stop helping. The thought frightened her more than she wanted to admit. The galaxy had become dependent on human kindness and courage. But kindness was not unlimited. And even human patience had its breaking points. The emergency session began at dawn. Elena Vasquez walked into the assembly hall to find it buzzing with nervous energy. Representatives whispered in small groups, their voices creating a low hum that filled the massive space. Something big was happening. Elena took her seat in the human section. Around her, the other human delegates looked confused and worried. They had received the emergency summons just 6 hours ago. No one had told them what the meeting was about. Speaker Thex 9 called for order. His metallic voice echoed through the hall. The assembly recognizes High Administrator Vel Thor, of the Zephyrian Collective. Elena tensed. The Zephyrians were trouble. They controlled 47 star systems and had the most powerful military force in the galaxy after humans. They were also known for their rigid thinking and fear of anything they could not control. High Administrator Vel Thor rose from his seat. He was tall and pale, with bright silver eyes that never seemed to blink. His species had evolved on a world where order and predictability meant survival. They hated chaos in any form. Fellow members of the assembly, Vel Thor began, his voice cold and precise. We gather today to address a growing threat to galactic stability. For 400 years, we have allowed one species to gain dangerous influence over our civilization. This must end. Elena felt her heart start beating faster. She knew he was talking about humans. Humanity claims to help us, Vel Thor continued, but their methods are chaotic and unpredictable. They form emotional bonds with other species. They take risks that endanger entire systems. They refuse to follow proper protocols. Their genetic makeup includes primitive survival instincts that make them violent and unstable. Angry murmurs rose from the human section. Elena put her hand up to quiet her people. She needed to hear where this was going. The Zephyrian Collective has prepared a detailed study of human behavior over the past century. The evidence is clear. Humans are a destabilizing force. Their emotional decisions have led to 17 major conflicts. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves creates unrealistic expectations for other species. Their pack-bonding behavior spreads chaos wherever they go. Elena stood up. High Administrator Vel Thor, I request permission to respond to these accusations. You will have your chance, Ambassador Vasquez. But first, let me present our solution. Velthor activated a holographic display. Charts and graphs filled the air above the assembly floor. Elena saw genetic sequences, brain scans, and behavioral analysis reports. The collective proposes immediate genetic standardization of the human species. We will remove the primitive emotional centers in their brains. We will eliminate their pack-bonding instincts. We will make them logical and predictable like proper civilized beings. This can be done safely using proven medical techniques. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Elena felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. They wanted to change human nature itself. They wanted to remove everything that made humans who they were. The procedure would be mandatory for all humans in assembly space, Velthor continued when the noise died down. Humans who refused treatment would be banned from all assembly worlds and facilities. This is the only way to ensure galactic stability. Elena looked around the hall. Some species appeared horrified by the proposal. Others nodded in agreement. The energy beings flickered with agitation. The machine species showed no emotion at all. Speaker Thex-9 called for order. Ambassador Vasquez, you may respond. Elena walked to the center of the hall. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. High Administrator Velthor, you say humans are chaotic and dangerous. But who saved your people when the Void Stalkers attacked your outer colonies last year? Human Defense Corps ships arrived within 6 hours. Human soldiers died protecting Zephyrian civilians they had never met. That was their job, Velthor replied coldly. No, Elena said. It was their choice. Humans choose to help because we form bonds with other beings. You want to remove that part of our nature, but without it, we would be just another self-interested species. We would not risk our lives for strangers. She looked around the hall, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. You call our emotions primitive. But those emotions are what make us care about species we barely know. You call our pack bonding chaotic. But that bonding is what lets us work with anyone, even former enemies. You call our willingness to sacrifice ourselves dangerous. But that willingness is what keeps the peace in this galaxy. High Administrator Velthor laughed. It was a cold sound without any humor. Ambassador, you prove our point. You speak of emotions and bonds and sacrifice as if they were good things. These primitive instincts cloud your judgment. They make you unpredictable and dangerous. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. She forced herself to stay calm. High Administrator, humanity has served the Assembly faithfully for 4 centuries. We have kept the peace, explored dangerous regions, and solved impossible problems. And our reward is to be told that our nature is wrong and must be changed. Your nature is incompatible with true civilization, Velthor stated. Accept the treatment or face the consequences. The debate continued for hours. Species after species stood to give their opinions. The Altarians spoke about how humans had saved their star system. The Machine Collective argued that efficiency required predictable behavior. The Wanderer fleet praised human navigators. The Academic Union worried about losing human creativity. Elena listened to every speech. She kept track of the votes in her head. The numbers were not good. When the debate ended, Speaker Thex-9 called for the formal vote. Elena watched the display board as the results came in. Green lights meant support for the human position. Red lights meant support for genetic standardization. The final count appeared: 643 red lights, 204 green lights. The measure passed by a huge majority. Elena stared at the numbers. Nearly 3/4 of the Assembly had voted to force humans to change their basic nature. Species they had helped and protected and died for had decided that humanity was a problem that needed to be fixed. Speaker Thex-9 spoke into the silence. The measure passes. Humanity has 30 standard days to begin genetic standardization procedures, or face immediate sanctions and expulsion from assembly space. Elena stood up slowly. She looked around the hall one last time. Then she walked to the central speaking platform. Fellow members of the Assembly, she began. Her voice carried clearly through the massive space. You have made your decision. You have decided that human nature is a threat to your civilization. You want us to become something different, something predictable and safe. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity rejects your ultimatum. We will not change our nature to make you more comfortable. We will not remove the parts of ourselves that make us who we are. And we will not accept punishment for being the species that has protected you for 4 centuries. High Administrator Velthor leaned forward. Then you choose sanctions and expulsion, Ambassador? Elena smiled. It was not a warm expression. High Administrator. You seem to think that humanity needs the Assembly more than the Assembly needs humanity. I believe you are about to discover how wrong you are. She turned to the human section. All human personnel are to report to their ships immediately. We are leaving. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Elena walked calmly toward the exit, followed by the entire human delegation. Behind her, she could hear representatives shouting questions and demands. As she reached the door, Elena turned back one final time. You wanted a predictable galaxy, she said. Congratulations. You are about to get one. The massive doors closed behind the humans, with a sound like thunder. The evacuation began 12 hours after Elena Vasquez walked out of the assembly hall. Across the galaxy, human ships received identical coded messages. The orders were simple. Withdraw immediately from all assembly positions and return to human space. Captain Sarah Chen was mediating peace talks on Kepler Station when her communication device buzzed. She looked at the message and felt her blood turn cold. Around the table, representatives from 6 different species were arguing about mining rights. They had been fighting for 3 days straight. Without her help, they would probably start shooting at each other. Sarah stood up quietly. I apologize, but I must leave immediately. There is an emergency. The silicate representative, a being made of living crystal, turned toward her. Captain Chen, we are at a critical point in these negotiations. Surely your emergency can wait a few hours? No, Sarah said simply. It cannot. She walked out of the conference room. Behind her, angry voices rose as the delegates realized their mediator was gone. By the time they figured out what had happened, Sarah was already on a shuttle heading for her ship. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human peacekeepers abandoned their posts with no explanations. They left behind equipment, supplies, and ongoing missions. Some had been working on projects for years. They dropped everything and headed for the nearest human ship. Commander Marcus Torres was leading a patrol through the danger zone when he got his orders. His fleet of 30 ships was hunting pirates who had been attacking civilian transports. They were close to catching the criminals. In a few more days, the shipping lanes would be safe again. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Then he activated his fleet communication system. All ships, this is Torres. We are returning to human space immediately. Break off all current operations and set course for Earth. His second officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, looked confused. Sir, we're almost finished with the pirate hunt. The cargo ships are still in danger. Not our problem anymore, Lisa. But sir, those are our orders. Execute them. The human fleet turned away from the danger zone. Behind them, pirate ships emerged from hiding places in the asteroid fields. Within hours, 3 cargo vessels were attacked and destroyed. The survivors sent desperate messages asking where the human patrol had gone. On research stations throughout the galaxy, human scientists and engineers began shutting down their experiments. Dr. Amanda Walsh was working on a cure for red plague, a disease that killed thousands of aliens every year. She was close to a breakthrough. Her computer models showed that the cure would be ready in just 2 more weeks. Amanda looked at her research data one last time. Then she wiped all the computer files and destroyed her samples. She had standing orders never to leave human medical knowledge where other species could find it. The cure for red plague would have to wait. In the Maelstrom sector, human crews were operating mining platforms in regions too dangerous for other species. The platforms extracted rare materials needed for faster-than-light travel. Every ship in the galaxy depended on these materials. Captain Robert Kim commanded the largest platform. He had been working in the Maelstrom for 8 years. The radiation and energy storms had almost killed him dozens of times. But the platform produced enough rare materials to supply half the galaxy. When Robert got his orders, he began the shutdown sequence immediately. The platform's automated systems would keep it running for about a month. After that, the harsh conditions would destroy everything. No other species could operate in the maelstrom long enough to maintain the equipment. Robert's crew worked with silent efficiency. They had trained for emergency evacuations. Within 18 hours, the platform was empty. 20 billion credits worth of equipment was left behind to rust and decay. The speed of the human withdrawal shocked other species. They had expected threats and negotiations. Instead, they got cold professionalism. Humans abandoned their posts so quickly that many aliens did not realize what was happening until it was too late. High Administrator Vel Thor was the first to understand the scope of the problem. Reports flooded into his headquarters on Zephyr Prime. Humans were leaving everywhere, all at once. It was not random panic. It was organized retreat. Vel Thor called an emergency meeting of the Zephyrian High Council. The humans are evacuating all assembly territories. Our intelligence suggests they have been preparing for this possibility for decades. Number 4. Council member Jex Wan frowned. That is impossible. Humans are emotional and impulsive. They cannot plan anything that complex. The evidence suggests otherwise, Vel Thor replied grimly. They are withdrawing with military precision. Every human ship knows exactly where to go and what to do. This is not a panic response. This is a planned operation. On Earth, Admiral Jennifer Hayes coordinated the massive evacuation from the Human Defense Command Center. Holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship and station in assembly space. Red dots marked completed evacuations. Green dots marked operations still in progress. Status report, Admiral Hayes requested. 73% evacuation complete, her aide replied. All civilian personnel have been recovered. Military units are finishing their withdrawals now. We estimate full completion within 48 hours. I'm soft of I'm in Savanters, Admiral Hayes nodded. Humanity had been preparing for this day since joining the assembly. Every human in space knew the evacuation protocols by heart. They had practiced the procedures hundreds of times. When the order came, they were ready. The assembly tried to respond. Speaker Thex 9 sent urgent messages to human ships. He offered to delay the genetic standardization vote. He promised new negotiations. He begged for human representatives to return to the assembly hall. Elena Vasquez received all the messages. She did not reply to any of them. The panic began on the third day. Trade routes through dangerous regions closed when human navigators disappeared. Colony worlds that depended on human protection found themselves defenseless. Research stations in hostile environments went dark when their human crews vanished. The Lumens, beings made of pure energy, sent a desperate message to the assembly. Their homeworld was under attack again. Pirates had returned as soon as the human patrol ships left. Without the Human Defense Corps, the Lumens had no way to protect themselves. The assembly voted to send help immediately. But they discovered a terrifying truth. Without humans, they had almost no military capability. Most species had given up maintaining large fleets decades ago. They had relied on human ships for protection. The few non-human warships available were either too slow, too weak, or unable to operate in the hostile space around the Lumen homeworld. The rescue mission was a disaster. Half the ships broke down before reaching their destination. The rest were destroyed by pirates who had better weapons and more experience. On the fourth day, Ambassador Elena Vasquez sent one final message to the assembly. Every species received it at the same time. Members of the assembly, she began. Her image appeared calm and professional. 4 days ago, you voted to force humanity to change its fundamental nature. You decided that our emotions, our bonds, and our willingness to sacrifice for others made us dangerous and unstable. She paused, looking directly into the camera. You have gotten your wish. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all assembly territories and responsibilities. We will no longer provide military protection, conflict mediation, or dangerous operations support. You wanted predictable species who would not risk themselves for strangers. You now have them. Elena smiled. It was a cold expression that made many aliens feel deeply uncomfortable. The galaxy wanted us to be logical and self-interested. Very well. Logic tells us that helping ungrateful aliens is a waste of resources. Self-interest tells us to focus on human welfare alone. We thank you for this valuable lesson. The transmission ended with coordinates for human space and a simple warning. Do not follow us. Do not contact us. Do not enter our territory. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. On assembly worlds, the reality of human withdrawal began to sink in. Without human peacekeepers, old conflicts flared up immediately. Trade routes became dangerous, as pirates grew bold. Research projects collapsed without human expertise. High Administrator Velthor stared at reports flowing into his headquarters. In just 4 days, the galaxy had become a more dangerous and chaotic place. The humans had not destroyed anything or attacked anyone. They had simply stopped helping. How long until we can replace their capabilities? He asked his aide. Unknown, sir. Some estimates suggest centuries. Others believe it may be impossible. Velthor felt a chill run through his silver blood. The Zephyrians had gotten exactly what they wanted. A predictable galaxy, without chaotic human interference. But as reports of wars, disasters, and collapse filled his desk, he began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. In human space, the Exodus ships arrived like a flood. Massive vessels carrying soldiers, scientists, and civilians filled the approaches to Earth and the other human worlds. They brought with them stories of the chaos beginning in assembly space. Admiral Hayes watched the final ships arrive. Humanity was home. They were safe. And for the first time in 4 centuries, they owed nothing to anyone else. The galaxy was on its own now. The first war started on day 7. The ancient hatred between the crystalline hegemony and the molten republics had been contained by human mediators for over a century. Both species needed the same rare minerals, found only on worlds with extreme volcanic activity. For generations, they had fought bloody conflicts over these resources. Captain Sarah Chen had negotiated a peace treaty between them 15 years ago. The agreement was complex but fair. Both species got access to the minerals they needed. The treaty held because both sides trusted Sarah to enforce it fairly. When disputes arose, she would listen to both sides and find solutions. Now Sarah was gone. When a mining accident on Forge World killed 12 crystalline workers, both species immediately blamed each other. The Molten Republic said the crystallines had sabotaged safety equipment. The crystallines accused the Molten Republics of cutting corners on worker protection. Without human mediation, the accusations turned into threats. Within days, both sides were mobilizing their fleets. The shooting started when a crystalline patrol ship fired on a molten transport that strayed too close to a disputed mining zone. The war spread quickly. Both species called on their allies for support. Soon, 16 different civilizations were taking sides in a conflict that could have been solved with one conversation. But there were no humans left to have that conversation. High Administrator Velthor watched the reports from his command center on Zephyr Prime. His advisors looked increasingly nervous as more conflicts erupted across the galaxy. The Wanderer fleet is fighting with the Academic Union over navigation rights, reported Intelligence Chief Nexval. The Machine Collective has declared war on the Energy Consortium over quantum processing disputes. The Outer Rim colonies are rebelling against the Core Worlds Alliance. How many active conflicts are we tracking? Velthor asked. 17 major wars, 43 border disputes, and over 200 trade conflicts, Nexval replied. The numbers are increasing every day. Quote, numbers. Velthor studied the tactical displays. Red zones marked areas of active combat. They were spreading like a disease across the galactic map. What about our peacekeeping forces? Sama. Sir, we have 12 operational warships. The crystalline molten conflict alone involves over 300 vessels. We simply do not have the military strength to intervene. The horrible truth was becoming clear. The Assembly had always assumed that peacekeeping was just about having enough ships and weapons. They had never understood that human peacekeepers succeeded because other species trusted them. Humans could walk into a war zone and get both sides to stop shooting long enough to talk. Other species could not do that. But the wars were only the beginning of the galaxy's problems. In the void sector, something much worse was happening. For 200 years, the area had been marked as a quarantine zone. Ships that entered the region disappeared or came back changed in terrible ways. The Assembly had always assumed it was just a dangerous area of space with radiation or energy anomalies. The truth was far worse. The void sector was home to the Void Watchers, beings from another dimension who fed on chaos and destruction. They had been trying to break into normal space for millennia. Human forces had been fighting a secret war against them for 2 centuries, keeping them contained behind dimensional barriers. Commander Maria Santos had led the Void Guard, a special human unit that few people knew existed. Her ships patrolled the dimensional barriers, fighting off Void Watcher scouts and repairing damage to the containment fields. It was dangerous work that killed most volunteers within 5 years. When humanity withdrew, Maria's forces abandoned their posts. The dimensional barriers began failing immediately. Without constant maintenance, they would collapse completely within months. The first Void Watcher scouts emerged on day 12. They appeared as shadows in space, dark spots that seemed to absorb light and energy. When they touched normal matter, it began to decay and twist into impossible shapes. The scouts attacked a research station on the edge of the void sector. The station's automated distress signal reached the Assembly 3 hours later. By the time rescue ships arrived, they found something that made their crews scream in terror. The station was still there, but it was wrong. The metal had turned into a substance that hurt to look at. The station's computer systems were broadcasting messages in languages that had never existed. "What happened here?" asked Captain Zix of the Assembly Rescue Fleet. His science officer, a crystalline being named Keth, studied the readings with growing horror. "Sir, the matter itself appears to have been altered at the quantum level. This should be impossible, according to all known physics." "And, are there survivors?" "Unknown, sir. Our sensors cannot function properly near the station. Something is interfering with all our equipment." Captain Zix ordered his fleet to retreat. The twisted station was left behind, broadcasting its impossible signals into empty space. Within days, similar reports came from other systems near the void sector. The Void Watchers were expanding their influence, corrupting reality itself as they spread. The Assembly tried to respond, but they faced a terrible problem. No one except humans understood how the dimensional barriers worked. The technology was completely beyond any other species. Human scientists had built the containment systems using principles that others could not even understand, much less repair. Dr. Yex Tan, the Assembly's chief scientist, studied the limited data they had on the barriers. "These equations make no sense," she told the Emergency Council. "The humans were manipulating space-time in ways that our science says should be impossible." "Can we build our own barriers?" asked Speaker Thex9. "We would need at least 50 years of research to even understand the basic principles. And that assumes we can find scientists willing to work in the void sector. Most of our people go insane just from being near the dimensional damage." Meanwhile, the galaxy's economy was collapsing. Trade routes through dangerous regions of space had been kept open by human navigators who understood how to pilot ships through radiation storms, gravity anomalies, and spatial distortions. Without them, cargo vessels were forced to take much longer routes or risk destruction. The Nexus route had been the galaxy's most important trade path. It cut through a region of space filled with quantum storms that could tear apart most ships. Human pilots had learned to read the storm patterns and navigate safely through them. The route cut travel time between the core worlds and the outer rim by 60%. When the humans left, the Nexus route closed immediately. No other species could pilot ships through the quantum storms. The storms changed patterns constantly, requiring split-second decisions and an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that only humans seemed to possess. Cargo prices doubled overnight. Some colonies that depended on regular supply runs began facing shortages of food and medicine. The Altarian Collective, which had never developed large-scale agriculture, began rationing food within 2 weeks of human withdrawal. "How did we become so dependent on them?" asked collective leader Yilmaz at an emergency session. "They volunteered for every dangerous job," replied Trade Minister Kolzen. "Over the centuries, we simply stopped learning how to do those things ourselves. Why risk our own people when humans were willing to take the risks for us?" The same pattern was repeated across the galaxy. Humans had gradually taken over all the jobs that other species found too dangerous, too difficult, or too unpleasant. They operated deep space mining platforms in hostile environments. They maintained fusion reactors on unstable stars. They explored regions of space that drove most beings insane. Other species had been happy to let humans handle these tasks. It seemed like a reasonable division of labor. Humans were good at dangerous work, so they should do dangerous work. But now the assembly realized they had lost the knowledge and skills to do these jobs themselves. The Maelstrom mining platforms began failing on day 18. The automated systems could not handle the constant radiation storms and gravitational anomalies. Without human engineers to perform maintenance, the platforms started breaking down one by one. The loss of the platforms was catastrophic. They produced 90% of the rare elements needed for faster-than-light travel. Without these materials, no new starships could be built. Existing ships would begin failing within a year as their engines wore out. Admiral Rex Durr of the Assembly Fleet stared at the supply reports in disbelief. "Are you telling me that we will lose faster-than-light travel within 12 months? "Yes, sir," replied his logistics officer. "The humans controlled every source of rare elements in the galaxy. We never developed alternative mining operations because their platforms were so efficient. What about diplomatic contact with Earth? Can we negotiate for continued access?" "No, sir. Human space is completely closed to us. They have established a quarantine zone around all their territories. Any ship that approaches gets a warning to turn back. If they continue forward, they simply disappear." On day 20, the Assembly held another emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species stood to report disasters in their territories. Wars were spreading. Trade was collapsing. Strange entities were emerging from the void sector and corrupting everything they touched. Speaker Thex-9 listened to each report with growing despair. The galaxy was falling apart without human intervention. But the worst part was realizing how much they had never understood about human capabilities. "We need to understand how humans kept the peace for so long," announced Speaker Thex-9. "Form a research committee to study their methods." The committee worked for days, interviewing aliens who had worked with humans and studying records of human operations. What they discovered was disturbing. Humans had not kept the peace through superior technology or military force. They had done it through empathy and sacrifice. Humans could understand what other species needed and wanted, even when those species could not explain it themselves. They were willing to risk their lives for complete strangers. They formed emotional bonds with anyone, even former enemies. These traits allowed them to build trust and find solutions that seemed impossible. Their success was based on psychological factors we do not possess, the committee reported. We cannot simply copy their techniques because we do not think the way they think. High Administrator Vel Thor read the report 3 times. Each time, the conclusion became more frightening. The galaxy had not just lost its protectors, it had lost the only species capable of being protectors. The humans had been unique in ways that the Assembly had never appreciated. Their chaotic emotions and unpredictable behavior were not flaws to be corrected. They were the very things that made humans special. As Vel Thor watched his civilization crumble around him, he began to understand a terrible truth. The Assembly had not voted to fix humanity. They had voted to destroy the only thing holding the galaxy together. And now it was too late to take it back. 6 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy was dying. High Administrator Vel Thor stood in his command center on Zephyr Prime, staring at tactical displays that showed a civilization in collapse. Red zones marked active wars. Black zones marked regions lost to the Void Watchers. Gray zones showed areas where trade and communication had simply stopped working. "Status report," Vel Thor ordered, though he dreaded the answer. Intelligence Chief Nexval consulted her datapad with shaking hands. 17 major wars are ongoing. 3 entire star systems have been consumed by Void Watcher corruption. Trade volume is down 84%. Food shortages affect 67 worlds. The Outer Rim colonies have stopped responding to communications entirely. Velthor closed his silver eyes. In just 6 months, 3,000 years of galactic civilization had crumbled. The assembly that once governed 847 species now struggled to maintain contact with fewer than 200. Many worlds had simply gone dark, their populations either dead or cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The crystalline molten war had spread across 12 systems. Both species had called in every favor and alliance they possessed. What started as a mining dispute had become a galactic conflict involving hundreds of worlds. Billions were dead, and there was no end in sight. The Machine Collective had declared total war on all organic species, claiming that biological beings were inherently chaotic and needed to be eliminated. Their fleets roamed the galaxy, converting entire worlds into robotic factories. The energy beings fought back by draining power from any mechanical devices they encountered. Entire regions of space had become uninhabitable battlefields. But the wars were almost a distraction from the real terror spreading from the Void sector. The Void Watchers had claimed 3 complete star systems. Anyone who entered those regions never returned. Long-range sensors showed planets that moved in impossible orbits around stars that burned with black fire. The contamination was spreading. Ships that came too close to the corrupted systems began experiencing mechanical failures and crew madness. Some vessels returned with empty hulls and no sign of their crews except for strange messages scratched into the metal walls in languages that had never existed. "Sir," Nexval continued, "we have received another request from the Lumens for emergency assistance. Their homeworld is under siege by 3 different pirate fleets. They estimate 37 hours before their defenses collapse completely." Velthor felt sick. The Lumens were beings of pure energy, peaceful and wise. They had contributed art and philosophy to galactic culture for millennia. Now they were about to be wiped out by common criminals because no one was strong enough to protect them. "Do we have ships available for a rescue mission?" "No, sir. Our entire fleet is defending our own territory from Machine Collective attacks. Even if we could spare ships, the pirate fleets have superior numbers and weapons." It was the same answer every time. The assembly had military forces, but they were scattered, outnumbered, and unprepared for real warfare. They had spent centuries relying on human protection. Now they were learning the difference between having an army and knowing how to use it. The economic collapse was just as devastating as the military disasters. Without access to rare materials from human-controlled mining operations, new starships could not be built. Existing vessels were breaking down as their faster-than-light engines wore out. Some species were already reverting to slower-than-light travel, effectively isolating themselves from the rest of the galaxy. Food distribution had collapsed completely. Many worlds had specialized in producing specific crops for trade, rather than feeding their own populations. Without reliable transport and trade networks, these worlds faced starvation. The Altarian Collective had already lost 12% of its population to famine. "What about our diplomatic missions to human space?" Velthor asked. Nexval's expression grew even more grim. "All failed, sir. We have sent 47 different missions over the past 6 months. None have made contact with human authorities. Most never returned at all." The truth about human space was deeply disturbing. Humanity had closed their borders completely. A network of automated defense stations surrounded all human territories. Any non-human ship that approached received a single warning message: turn back immediately or be destroyed. The few vessels that managed to escape described something impossible. Human space was protected by technology that the rest of the galaxy did not understand. Defense stations used weapons that could destroy entire fleets without visible energy beams or missile launches. Ships would simply cease to exist, leaving no wreckage behind. "Sir, there is something else," Nexval said quietly. "Our long-range monitoring stations have detected unusual activity in human space. Their shipyards are operating at maximum capacity. They appear to be building vessels unlike anything in our databases. Velthor felt a chill run through his body. What kind of vessels? Unknown, sir. The energy signatures are completely foreign. Whatever they are building, it is not based on any technology we recognize. The Assembly had made a terrible discovery over the past months. Humans had been hiding their true capabilities for centuries. The weapons and ships they used while working with the Assembly were primitive compared to what they possessed. They had deliberately limited themselves to technologies that other species could understand and accept. Dr. Yextan had spent months analyzing captured human equipment. Her findings were disturbing. Every human device we have studied contains backup systems and hidden features, she reported to the Emergency Council. They were designed to appear less advanced than they actually are. We believe humans have been concealing their technological superiority for our entire association with them. Why would they do that? Asked Speaker Thex9. Fear, perhaps, or kindness. They may have worried that showing their true capabilities would frighten other species or create resentment. The irony was bitter. Humans had hidden their strength to avoid making other species feel inferior. They had pretended to be less advanced than they were in order to maintain peaceful relationships. The Assembly had repaid this kindness by demanding that humans change their fundamental nature. As the months passed, desperate delegations continued to attempt contact with humanity. The Wanderer fleet sent their most experienced diplomats. The Academic Union offered to share all their scientific knowledge. The energy beings promised unlimited energy supplies. Every offer was ignored. Ambassador Kethri of the Centauri delegation had been trying to reach human space for 3 months. Her ship was one of the fastest in the galaxy, designed specifically for diplomatic missions to dangerous regions. She had negotiated treaties with hostile species and convinced warring factions to make peace, but human space was different. As her ship approached the border, automated stations came to life. Dozens of defense platforms emerged from seemingly empty space, surrounding her vessel with weapons that registered impossible energy readings on her sensors. The warning message was always the same. Non-human vessel, you are approaching restricted space. Turn back immediately, or be destroyed. This is your only warning. Ambassador Kethri tried every diplomatic protocol she knew. She broadcast messages of peace in 17 languages. She transmitted offers of alliance and mutual aid. She even sent personal apologies for the Assembly's actions. Nothing worked. The defense stations remained silent, except for the repeated warning. On her final attempt, Kethri ignored the warning and tried to push deeper into human space. Her ship simply stopped working. All systems shut down simultaneously. Life support, engines, weapons, communications. Everything failed at once. Her vessel drifted helplessly as the defense stations watched. After 12 hours, her systems suddenly reactivated. A new message appeared on her communication screen. Leave now. Do not return. This is not a negotiation. Kethri fled human space as quickly as her ship could carry her. When she reported back to the Assembly, her message was simple. Humanity is no longer interested in talking to us. The truth about human preparations became clear through intelligence reports. For decades, humanity had been building hidden shipyards and research facilities in remote systems. They had stockpiled resources and developed technologies that they never shared with the Assembly. They had planned for the possibility that their relationship with other species might end badly. They knew this would happen eventually, reported Intelligence Chief Nexval. The evidence suggests they have been preparing for complete isolation for over 50 years. Their withdrawal was not a panicked reaction. It was the execution of a long-term plan. The most frightening reports came from the edges of human space. Monitoring stations detected massive construction projects in systems that had been empty when humans left the Assembly. Entire worlds were being converted into fortresses and shipyards. The scale of the construction suggested that humanity was preparing for something much larger than simple defense. Admiral Rex Dur studied the intelligence reports with growing horror. These are not defensive installations, he told the military council. Based on the size and configuration, they appear to be staging areas for major offensive operations. Offensive operations against whom? asked General Vex March. Rex Dur looked at the tactical displays showing the galaxy in chaos. Against everyone, I suspect. The final revelation came from an unexpected source. A human message reached the Assembly 6 months to the day after their departure. It was not addressed to any government or leader. It was broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Elena Vasquez appeared on screens across hundreds of species. She looked older than when she had walked out of the assembly hall, and there was something cold in her eyes that had not been there before. Citizens of the former galactic community, she began. 6 months ago, your governments voted to force humanity to change its fundamental nature. You decided that our emotions, our willingness to sacrifice for others, and our capacity for empathy made us dangerous and unstable. Elena paused, looking directly into the camera. You were right. The admission sent shockwaves across every world that received the transmission. Elena continued speaking with calm precision. For 4 centuries, humanity restrained its true nature in order to coexist peacefully with other species. We limited our technological development to levels you could understand. We pretended to be weaker than we were to avoid frightening you. We sacrificed our own interests to protect yours. She smiled, and the expression was terrifying in its cold perfection. You have taught us that this was a mistake. You have shown us that kindness is seen as weakness, that sacrifice is taken for granted, that protecting ungrateful beings is pointless. The transmission showed images of human space. Massive fleets of ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. Weapons, platforms that dwarfed the largest assembly vessels. Industrial facilities that could build entire armadas in a matter of weeks. Humanity is no longer bound by the need to protect those who despise us, Elena said. We are free to pursue our true potential, without concern for those who cannot keep up. You wanted us to be logical and self-interested. Congratulations. You have created exactly what you asked for. The transmission ended with coordinates and a simple message. We are watching. We are waiting. We are remembering everything. In the months that followed, the Assembly tried desperately to understand what the message meant. Some species hoped that humanity might return if they apologized properly. Others feared that humans were planning an invasion. A few wise leaders suspected something worse, that humanity was simply waiting for the galaxy to destroy itself. High Administrator Velthor stood in his command center for what he knew would be the last time. Zephyr Prime was under attack by 3 different enemy fleets. His planet would fall within hours. The Great Zephyrian Collective, one of the most powerful civilizations in galactic history, was about to cease to exist. He thought about the vote 6 months ago. The measure to force human genetic standardization had passed by an overwhelming majority. At the time, it had seemed like a reasonable solution to a complex problem. Humans were unpredictable. They made decisions based on emotions rather than logic. They took dangerous risks for people they barely knew. All of that was true. But those same traits had made them the galaxy's protectors. Their unpredictability let them find solutions no one else could imagine. Their emotions let them care about strangers. Their willingness to take risks kept everyone else safe. The Assembly had voted to remove humanity's greatest strengths because they could not understand that those strengths came with apparent weaknesses. They had tried to perfect beings who were already perfect for their role in galactic society. As enemy ships began bombarding his planet, Velthor realized the true scope of the Assembly's mistake. They had not just lost their protectors. They had turned their protectors into something else entirely. Humanity was still out there, watching the galaxy tear itself apart. They had the power to stop the wars, end the suffering, and restore order, but they no longer had any reason to care about species that had rejected them. The age of galactic peace was over. The age of human judgment had begun, and in their hidden fleets and fortress worlds, humanity waited with the patience of a species that had learned to think in terms of geological time rather than individual lifespans. They would wait as long as necessary for the galaxy to learn the consequences of its choices. The last thing Velthor saw before his world burned was a human ship. Sleek and silent, watching from the edge of the system. It did not intervene, it simply observed, recording everything for some future purpose that he could not imagine and did not want to understand. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it would live or die, with the consequences.